And we're back on the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. So we know that the journey to an ideal career is not a straight line, but one full of twists and turns. And that's what we're going to talk with Merideth Mehlberg all about. She writes about this in her new book, Your Finest Work, Career Fulfillment in a Complicated World. And complicated world it is. I'm so excited. I've been so excited for this conversation with Merideth Mehlberg. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Shalom. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So I always love to get to know the person behind the microphone. Merideth, I know you didn't wake up one day and decide to write about career fulfillment in a complicated world just for fun. Tell us your story.
Sure. Well, so growing up, my mom wanted me to be a psychologist, but even as a young person, I realized that wasn't action-oriented enough for me. I had a lot of different interests. I considered myself a generalist. And coming out of UC Berkeley, I went into recruitment. I was working as a translator between people who wanted jobs and people who had them. And that led to me later getting into product management, where I was building systems that recruiters used. And that also was a translation job between technology professionals who built software and customers who needed software to solve business problems. So through that experience, I became exquisitely oriented to observation, helping audiences understand messages from different perspectives, et cetera. But I was looking for what I really wanted to do. And my ladder was up the wrong wall as I got into upper echelons of product management and startup environments. And I worked with a career counselor who helped me realize that I actually wanted to become a coach. I hadn't been familiar with coaching before that, but over a period of time, I saved up a whole bunch of money and quit my job and made a transition. And over about 3 years, ramped down my career in IT and product management, worked as a consultant for a while to finance my education, and then stood up my practice. That's been about 20 years ago now. And my translation abilities really come in handy when I'm working with professionals. I get sort of the win of coaching is very action oriented, helping people figure out where they want to go, but it builds on my pragmatism that came from the corporate and startup experiences that I had as a product manager and a recruiter. And it's just something I've never really looked back on. And about 10 years ago, my husband quit his job and he supports me in the business. And I've had various versions of my work over the years, but about 6 years ago, I started writing down what I was noticing because I'm a really good pattern matchers. And I was seeing that even though everybody's story was different, of the thousands of people that I've worked with, there were some patterns. And I ultimately understood and discovered there were about seven. And 7 strategies, 7 traps, and that's what I wrote about. And I just felt like it was a good capstone on this 20-year body of work that I have behind me in the coaching field.
Absolutely. So you practice what you preach. I know you certainly have had your twists and turns, and it sounds like you are not only accomplishing everything that you set out in those early discussions with your mom, but now you are partnering with high EQ executives in strategic roles and really helping them through coaching to steer that ship. And we're going to talk more about that in a couple of minutes. So Merideth, this is really, really interesting. And the last few words in your book title is A Complicated World. So Merideth, what has changed? What's going on right now in terms of folks that maybe the pandemic may have helped to clarify, perhaps, in sort of helping people determine what they actually really want to do? Are you seeing any trends out there?
For sure. I think the biggest thing is that right now, the good news about what's happened is that nobody's going to question you if you decide you want to make a change. Like the world around us is so disrupted that it's time for purpose and meaning. And more people are really taking stock and saying, given the way the world is going, how do I want to be in my life and my professional career? So I'm finding that in some ways, my work is getting harder because there's a lot of pain that people are showing up with, a lot of uncertainty. You have to, in ambiguous times, more and more, you have to have steadiness come from within you. And so I'm noticing that a lot of focus is on how does a person make sense of what's going on around them and translate that into what they want to do, what the personal agency they have for their own life and their professional career. So more than ever, there's sort of this urgency of, gosh, this really needs to matter for me. I want to do something that feels like it's going to make me feel like I'm contributing to something that's larger than myself. The other thing that I'm noticing, and I talk a lot with futurists, and when you go back to sort of like the 10,000 foot level and look at overarchingly what's happening in this decade, my favorite futurist, David Houle, talks about how this is the most complicated a disruptive decade in human history, the 2020s. And why it is because it's the collapse of 20th century thinking and the onset of 21st century thinking. So thinking and institutions. So the pandemic is seen as just the first of many disruptions that we're going through. And so this is leading to, a crisis in lots of different ways, which we're seeing all around us. But it's also causing sort of this inward journey of, okay, what do I want given this reality around me, and how do I want to be with that in myself? And so I'm seeing more and more people looking for purpose, meaning really wanting to both hedge their bets and take care of their needs, and the needs of their families and communities, but at the same time make decisions that matter for their own life. And how it's looking at a lot of my different clients is like having incubating a future change or doing something alongside their current body of work, thinking more about a portfolio career. There's a number of different ways it shows up, but those are some of the trends that I'm noticing, Shalom.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's easier said than done when, again, you want to, you know what you know where you want to be, but you don't know how to get there. And that's why you've come up with a really interesting approach. It's called CLEAR, which of course is an acronym. Meredith, do you mind walking us through the highlights of what that is?
Sure. It's an easy to remember way to approach any problem or question you're sitting with. It could be around your career, it could be around your family, it could be any number of things. But CLEAR stands for clarify, learn, evaluate, act, and refine. And the idea is in the first step, clarify, you're figuring out what is the problem I'm trying to solve? What is the question I'm sitting with? And it's really important not to rush that. You have to think about how will I know that I've solved it well? What are the measures of success that I will use? It comes from when you learn to be a coach, there's a lot of work about how do you make sure you're solving for the right issue. And it may not be the first presenting issue that somebody brings up. So clarifying what you want to be solving, whether it's, hey, how will I know my career feels purposeful? Or how will I know that I've made a good decision about my next step professionally? Learn is, okay, well, now that I know what the measures of success are and the real question, what are the options available to me? How can I get curious about what directions I could go? What am I already thinking about? What could I ask others about? Where could I research? How can I be in brainstorming mode? And then evaluate is, okay, now that I have those options, which ones make the most sense given what I've said is important to me? And part of the clarify step is also how will I have those success measures of how I've known that I've been true to myself? So evaluating is taking a look at those criteria and comparing them to the options so that you can make the best decision. Sometimes the decision is one way to go from here. Sometimes it's a couple, but the idea is that you distill it down. And then act is, taking action on your own behalf. That would require, taking what I call imperfect action. You're not trying to be doing it right. You're trying to make incremental progress. So what are the things that you can start doing, continue doing, stop doing? What are some experiments you can run? What revisions or evolutions or agile methodology might you use to take action and make the best decision and move forward with it now? And then refine gives you sort of the grace of, okay, well, I took action. Now I'm going to refine my approach. I'm going to go back and clarify, go back to the start of the process, clarify, what does the world look like now for me? What do I need to continue to tweak as I navigate this for myself? So that's the clear framework, Shalom. And like I said, it can be applied to lots of different situations.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with Meredith Mehlberg, the author of Your Finest Work, Career Fulfillment in a Complicated World. I know it just came out just about 2 months ago, but this is really a process that you've been a part of and really you've captured it. And I know it's going to help so many folks. We're going to send people over to your website in just a moment or two. But Meredith, real quick, before we get to that point, I'm curious if you can highlight any success stories, either in your coaching or readers that you've heard from that this has helped to clarify, no pun intended, in their complicated path forward.
Sure, there's lots of examples, but just a couple that come to mind was a leader who was having a 360 done. I was his leadership coach, and his company had hired me to take a look at what was getting in the way of him being truly effective. And what he learned was that he wasn't paying attention to the unspoken in the relationships with his stakeholders. And so as a result, they thought he wasn't a good partner. He was so focused on delivering. He was a technology leader, so focused on delivering that he was not paying attention to the needs his stakeholders had. And so we worked to help him become aware of how do you read the room? How do you be inclusive in the way you
Amazing.
make agendas for meetings and make sure that you're speaking to the elephant in the room? And what he was able to transform was to pay attention on a whole new level
Hmm.
and up level his ability to be successful. He got a promotion. He later went on
Absolutely.
to a new job. So
Well,
that's an
Meredith,
example.
let's make sure we get people over to your
Oh
book
yeah,
and over to your website.
sure.
How can people get in touch?
Sure, they can look at yourfinestwork.com. I've got some free tools there. They can sign up and take a look at my coaching options as well. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's interested in learning more.
Absolutely. Meredith Mehlberg, thanks so much for joining us. Quick break. We'll be right back.